This is your host, and in this video, we're going to look at a case required for the English law element of the A-level law course, namely Merritt versus Merritt. So if you're studying a level law, this is a video for you. And as always, time starts now. So Mr. and Mrs. Merritt were man and wife, and they lived together in a house which was in both of their names. Now, over time, their relationship broke down irretrievably, and Mr. Merritt left the family home and started living with another woman. Now, on March 1970, the parties met in order to sort out financial matters arising from the breakdown of the marriage. And Mr. Merritt, as part of those discussions, wrote down the following: "In consideration of my wife continuing to live in the house and pay all the mortgage installments as they fall due, I promise to do all that is necessary to transfer the house into her sole name." And she agreed and continued to make the mortgage payments as they fell due. Now some time had passed, and Mrs. Merritt discovered that Mr. Merritt had failed to do all that was necessary to transfer the house into her sole name. And so she issued proceedings against him for specific performance of the agreement and also for damages for breach of contract. Now Mr. Merritt resisted this, and he said there was no contract between them, because there was no intention to create legal relations. That is to say, it was just a casual domestic arrangement, like in Balfour versus Balfour. Well, in order to see whether or not this was a binding contract, we need to consider first of all the issue, then the rule, the court's application of that rule to the facts of this particular case, and then finally, the decision and why it matters. So what was the issue? Well, it was whether this agreement was a binding contract, and in order to decide whether it was a binding contract, the court had to ask whether the parties intended to create legal relations. Legal relations are created where there is a promise which the law will enforce. And in order to decide whether there was a promise which the law would enforce, the court had to look at the circumstances surrounding the making of the agreement and the surrounding circumstances which we looked at in the previous video. Now the general rule is that you cannot infer an intention to create legal relations from a domestic agreement between husband and wife. This is because historically the law presumed that there was no intention to create legal relations within a marriage because everything within a marriage was presumed to be a gift. There was a presumption of a gift between spouses, meaning that one spouse could not sue the other for breach of contract. However, this presumption can be overturned, and as Lord Denning-Mister said, where the parties are separated, or in the process of separating, the court must have regard to the fact that they are no longer husband and wife and are treating each other in that way. And in those circumstances, if they make an agreement in writing, it will be presumed that they intend to create legal relations. So applying that rule to the facts of this particular case, Merritt and Mrs. Merritt were clearly separated. And although they had been married for only 3 years before this agreement was made, they had lived separately for the last year. They had also put their agreement in writing, which is strong evidence that they both intended it to be binding. Furthermore, the subject matter of the agreement was serious. It was about property and financial arrangements, not a casual domestic promise. As Lord Denning said, when a married couple, whether living together or not, make serious and genuine proposals to one another as to how they will deal with their property, both what each of them shall have and what each of them shall do with it, and get it in writing and sign it. I think it is very clear that they intend to create legal relations, and this is even more so when it is a document in which each of them has something to give up and is getting something in return. The Court of Appeal therefore decided that the agreement was a binding contract because it was made in writing. It dealt with serious financial matters, and it evidenced an intention to create legal relations. In other words, it was not merely a casual domestic arrangement like in Balfour versus Balfour, but a binding agreement. In reaching this decision, the Court of Appeal overturned the decision in Balfour versus Balfour and applied a new presumption in its place. That new presumption is that agreements between spouses are presumptively binding when they are separated or in the process of separating. So why does this case matter? Well, it matters because it clarifies the legal status of separation agreements. Once a married couple are separated, the law presumes that any written agreement between them is intended to be legally binding. The case also clarifies the status of oral agreements. Although this was a written agreement, the court stated that if the agreement had been oral rather than written, it would still have been binding. So, in conclusion, the court held that there was a binding contract between the parties and that Mr. Merritt had breached that contract by failing to transfer the property into Mrs. Merritt's name. He was therefore ordered to do that. If you want a summary of every single English law case required for your syllabus, then click here. Subscribe to my new case summaries series, and you can be sure that you won't miss anything. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and found it useful. And if you did, please do remember to like it, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your fellow law students. Comment below with the next case that you want me to cover. And until next time, you're brilliant. Keep studying, and I'll see you in the next video.